Welcome to the Global Discussion, a discussion with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. My name is Simon Hodgkins. Today I'm joined by David Galea. David, you're very welcome to the show. Let's begin by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us what you do and give us a little bit of context for our audience today. Over to you, David.
Thank you very much, Simon, for inviting me on your podcast. First of all, it is a real pleasure to be here today, and I welcome all your audience, and I really hope that this will be an interesting discussion. My background is basically, if I were to describe myself succinctly, it would be in the business of change. I am a person who likes change, which is quite a bit unusual because most people don't like change. But for the past 25 years, I have been going through various changes on a personal level and also on a professional level. And I find the fact that it really fascinates me that people are resistant to change because they like what they are doing today, even if that might not be the best thing to do within that particular circumstance. And I've always challenged assumptions that people make about their status quo and to help them improve themselves. So that was always been my mission, to help people to improve, to help companies to improve, and yes, even at a national level, to help countries improve as well, because I've also been involved in the development of national strategies, competitiveness assessments, and also rolling out change management programs. And in the past few years, aside from wars, and God forbid, diseases and natural disasters, one of the most important things that is acting as a catalyst for change is technology. And that is precisely why I have involved myself into technology-related projects, for the simple reason because I firmly believe that although technology is not a magic wand and it will not make your problems disappear, it is a key enabler of change, and it provides opportunities to organizations to come up with innovation, to drive innovation within not just their business, but on a country level, and also on a global level, to make the world a better place. And I feel that with my knowledge and experience of managing change from a country level to the individual level, I felt compelled to enter into this field, which is so fascinating. We're finding different types of technologies, including IoT. Today, everyone knows about AI, generative AI, looking at cloud computing, coming upstream quantum technologies, as particularly quantum communication. And all these technologies are unraveling potential for developing new initiatives, creating new value added for people, and creating opportunities for people to advance from where they are today to where they want to go. And I've been basically looking at helping governments as well. Was involved also as a subject matter expert for the United Arab Emirates government on several initiatives, helping them and advising them on best practices in digital enablement across various ministries and government departments. I've also been involved in companies which are on the FTSE 500, but I've also worked with SMEs and startups. And I must say, my most treasured memories are precisely with startups and SMEs. Why? Because the environment is really vibrant. There is more potential to innovate in an agile way. I have nothing against the large companies. They're also very good and they have significant potential for success and they have proven themselves. But the smaller entities are more agile in themselves, and it is more, and frequently they are underdogs. And I like helping the underdogs, to help them come up in front and take a front seat in success. Because I like the story about David and Goliath, where you've got Goliath, which is this big giant there who is so strong and big, and he can conquer the world. But David is wise, he is cunning, and he uses a different strategy to actually beat his opponent. And I firmly believe that any company, any individual can turn around his very weaknesses to become strengths depending upon the industry in which he is operating. So it is also about looking and thinking outside the box and coming up with a strategy that, well, for a clear case in point, for example, when I was helping the Maltese government develop a competitiveness strategy for the country, we were saying, how can we compete with the largest countries in the world? We are too small. Yes, let's lose our smallness to become agile, to compete not on economies of scale, but economies of speed. But we are surrounded by the sea. How can we actually export materials and manufacturing? Okay, let's set up a proper maritime industry which is going to benefit the country as a whole. And through the maritime industry, it is going to boost other industries, creating linkages and connections with other countries. So it is creating, there is nothing which can be considered really as a weakness. Everything, if you think outside the box, can become an opportunity for you to make business and to create a success out of it. Because what's important is that everyone is different. What's important is to know where you are different and capitalize on your difference to create a competitive advantage. And technology is clearly that route to that path, so to speak. And I have also faced quite a few changes myself. I've changed completely my lifestyle, and I've embraced a number of principles where I am more attuned with myself. I used to focus a lot on corporate branding, for example. I used to focus more on developing my brand, which is called Beat Limited. But more recently, I focus a bit more on personal branding. So I'm focusing more on a personal touch. So rather than looking at specific outcomes on a corporate level, I try and get in touch with the physical and real people to create real benefits to those people in particular to thrive and succeed. And that is basically, in a nutshell, what I've been doing. I've written also a book, which is called Digital Made Simple. It was a best-selling book on Amazon and have conceded rights to a third party to publish and translate in Mandarin and will be distributed in the Republic of China next year. And it has also won an Axiom Business Book Award in business technology, and which is considered to be the Oscars of business books. And I am really happy to have won this award, and I look forward to share my thoughts and insights with different people to help them succeed from a digitalization point of view throughout their journey.
Thank you, David. There is so much experience that you have. And as you were talking, I was thinking about, whether it was your career at KPMG, I think in the earlier days, or whether it was with Beat Limited, and you've talked about your role as well now, and whether it's Centigo, writing the book, etc. But you've done an awful lot at government level, global enterprise, company level, and as you say, a particular sweet spot for the David rather than the Goliath in the SME sort of, medium-sized, those kind of agile businesses that can do things maybe a little bit differently. When you were starting off on your career, though, for our listeners and people watching us today, was that the kind of career you had in mind, or did you just end up doing this kind of thing?
A good question. I've always wanted to be in the knowledge industry, in the knowledge economy, because my passion is learning. And I believe that the knowledge economy, where you are imparting advice to others, really and truly, you are also learning from that advice and from other people. And it is an iterative process. The moment I stop learning, I stop living. That is my mantra. So I've always wanted a job which is not a routine, but rather the routine is change, right? So, and what better career can you have than as a coach or a consultant in your life to manifest that feeling of change, continuous change, and helping others succeed in their own change process. So it was always ingrained in me to help people in bringing about change, because that is who I am.
I like that a lot, David. Thanks. You mentioned your book, and of course we have to talk about that because it's a key part of a lot of the sort of work that you're involved in. And your book, as you mentioned, it's called Digital Made Simple. But it's more than that, I think. It really does give people these sort of insights that they need, particularly when it comes to things like digital programs. We've all heard of the term digital transformation, but I think it's much more than that. It seems to have moved on a little bit more. And I know that you wrote it as more of a practical
Yes.
approach to this, which I think is really useful for people to understand. And one of the terms that you use is about getting through the digital chaos that's out there. Could you maybe tell us more about the book, the process of writing it, what people can expect if they want to go and have a look at the book? Because I think there's an awful lot of insights in there for people as we all live in this digitally connected world today.
Yes. Thank you for raising this point because it's a really important point to make. Um, I wrote this book precisely because most consultancy firms and other companies, technology companies, focus on creating highly complex models and trying to make sense of the world. And yes, the world is a complex place. But the problem is that we have only a limited bandwidth of processing capability as a human. Yes, okay, well, there is AI now and it would change. But from a purely biological point of view, there is only so much that a person can absorb and act based on that information. Today's problem is not the lack of information, but it is all about an information overload and finding a right way of sifting through all the noise that there is in the market and making sense of that data and making sense of that to make the most of the knowledge available and creating the right agile structures in your operation to adapt to the new information, because it's not just about listening to what the information is saying, but it is having the right agile structure. And this is where it is a challenge for large companies to change and being agile enough to adapt themselves to that information. And the word chaos is a very fundamental word because many people fear chaos. But in actual fact, people should embrace chaos. Why? Especially the SMEs and the startups. What is the reason for this? I'll tell you why. Because large organizations have tried and tested routines which have benefited from the learning curve effect. So they have very efficient processes, they are very structured and very standardized. So the unit cost of carrying out one process is much lower than that which would be possibly achieved by an SME. However, what chaos disrupts standards and routines. So, and creating new ones, because chaos doesn't mean random. Chaos effectively means that new routines are being created. The issue is, have you deciphered the new algorithm that is creating that chaos? The first person who deciphers the new algorithm which has been created by that chaos is the person who will benefit from a first mover advantage in the industry. And that is why it is very important to have your ears on the ground to listen carefully to what the data is saying and coming up with appropriate ways of interpreting the new patterns. Because once you decipher the pattern, then you can be the first in the market. And you can come up with different innovations, and the technology itself creates chaos. So technology creates chaos. Chaos creates new business opportunities. We can basically implement that technology to make sense of that chaos. But through your own solution, then you can propose and come up with a new source of chaos yourself. So it is an iterative process that can benefit immensely small companies who try to innovate. In fact, innovative companies, that's what they try and do. They try to create chaos in the market. In an economic world, in a perfect market, there is no competitive advantage, right? Because everyone has the same product. The moment you change the price of the product, your demand will be zero. So your ball game will effectively be to create a differentiated market, an imperfect market. And you create an imperfect market by creating chaos, essentially, creating innovation, creating new products which are different from the competition, and therefore you stand competitive advantage and charge a different price.
Makes so much sense. And it kind of leads me nicely onto something I want to talk about, which is you mentioned the agility that seems to be a must-have
Yes.
part of the business's makeup these days. And maybe some of the larger global businesses, they struggle sometimes to be agile, to be innovative, because they're so used to doing things a certain way. It takes time for them to change, etc. And it can take exceptional leadership and culture to really bring about that change. And, yes, maybe that's an advantage to smaller, more nimble, agile companies. But the point I want to get to is a little bit more about the future of work. And I raise this to you because, post pandemic, we're in the era of AI. We're rapidly heading towards quantum computing and all the, whatever that looks like. But you've recently joined an organization as well where you're looking at smart cities and smart ways of working, etc.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, from your perspective, when you're talking to organizations around the world or working with businesses or consulting, we're in a different place than we were a few short years ago. It has changed dramatically. And so, of course, we need to make digital simple. But I'm interested in the future of work, smart cities, and how that impacts maybe the way companies are working today. Have you any thoughts on that, David?
Very good question, Simon. Yes, clearly, first of all, my definition, I would change the definition of a smart city. This is always what I tell people. We should not be talking about smart cities, but we should be talking about smart communities, because the central unit of service is not to a building, but it is to a person. So everything has to revolve around the person. So the person could be a consumer, it could be a citizen, it could be an employee, right? So we need to build the cities around the needs of these persons. In terms of the future of work, clearly, obviously, the most obvious example would be commuting, clearly. So most of us work from home. But however, one of the issues that I find from experience when working remotely is that working remotely could be very effective and efficient for routine processes, okay? But it might pose a challenge when it comes to creativity and innovation, because it is not about not having the tools, but most creativity and innovation comes out of a relationship of trust. Because wherever there is innovation and creativity, there is also failure. Because to arrive at a successful innovation, you need to fail not a couple of times, but tens, if not hundreds of times before you get something which is really of value. So unless appropriate relationships are forged on a physical basis, where you have a good informal and a physical relationship with people where you know them before, or you have been either going out socially, or even on a workplace where you are sharing an office sometimes together, it gives an element of trust when you are starting to expose your vulnerability to fail. And the vulnerability, because that very vulnerability to fail will lead to the success. So creating this type of confidence, I think, is fundamentally important to develop an environment of knowledge, of creativity and innovation. But more importantly, about the future of work, it is very hard to plan your career today, because when you are the age of 16, quite tens decades ago, we used to say, okay, I want to become an accountant, I want to become a doctor, I want to become another profession, and you stay in that profession for all your life. But today, the careers are changing so dramatically. We don't know what's going to happen in a couple of years. We could be facing a completely new different types of jobs, which we wouldn't have ever imagined today. So what I would see the way of planning today, we need to perhaps change the way we prepare our people, our youngsters to face the job market. Rather than facing a career, my suggestion, recommendation, I've done this quite a few times and it was quite well received, is actually to change your school of thought from a career to a portfolio of powers. Now, what do I mean to a portfolio of powers? For example, one of your powers could be building networks. Another source of power would be competence and knowledge in developing in a particular technical field. It could be power of communication. And by developing a portfolio of powers, superpowers, these can be reconfigured in different ways to adapt in different careers because your superpowers don't change, but then you can, through different permutations, reconfigure them in a way that adapts to a career which today does not exist yet. Whereas if you mold yourself to become a computer engineer, in my times we used to study about tapes on computers and then floppy disks. Today you don't hear about these things, So it's completely different. So it's regardless. You need to create this composition of superpowers. But I think there is one superpower which everybody should get, in my view, and that is the superpower of learning, because learning how to learn. Because if you learn how to learn, you are open to adaptability and change, which brings about your question about agility. I think today, every organization should be a learning organization, even if you are in the manufacturing industry, no matter what industry. The production process is just a maintenance process. What each organization should strive is to become a learning organization. And the only way in which you can become a learning organization is by the accumulation of knowledge and data from the market. I sometimes use an expression which is, today, in the past, organizations competed on land. Then they competed on capital. Then they competed on resources, on knowledge. But today, we're going to a next stage, which is we compete on algorithms. Who has the best algorithm will win. Look at the most successful companies in the world. They are not property companies. They are not mining companies. They are highly knowledge-intensive, algorithm-driven organizations like Google, Facebook, Meta. These type of organizations. So having a strong algorithm is the key ingredient for success today in the modern world. And that's why technology is so important, not just for technology companies, but even for traditional companies. They need to get knowledge, they need to learn, and they need to be agile enough to adapt to their new environment.
I like the portfolio of power and the superpower. I love the fact that you mentioned the organization's key requirement to be learning, to be a learning organization. Some great takeaways there. And also what you said earlier, which was not so much smart cities, but smart communities. I think that's very powerful because we're all building communities in one way or another, aren't we? Whether it's offline or online, on digital platforms or not. But yeah, some great takeaways there. Thank you for sharing that, David. I want to ask you a bit about how you're thinking about the future, though, because obviously for people watching us, there's lots of certificates behind you. You've got a lot of experience that you bring to the table, but you've got to keep your finger on the pulse. You've got to be thinking a little bit about the future. So how do you go about planning? What does the next 6, 12, 18 months look like for you? What are you focusing on? What are you thinking about as you look forward?
My main focus is on, I used to do a lot of consulting work, but today I prefer having one-to-one conversations with decision makers to transfer some of my knowledge to them to become better in leading and implementing digital transformation programs. So today I'm a coach, I'm a mentor, and I help these organizations to actually design, develop, and implement sustainable digital transformation programs right from the start until the actual implementation. And I help them because I didn't just design, I didn't just consult. I got my hands dirty. I've been there, I've implemented it. There were successes, there were failures. I learned from the failures as well, obviously, and move on and trying to come up with new ways in which these programs can work. And I try to basically mold people into a simple mindset in the sense that not using, okay, we have lots of complex models and concepts that are used across. If you do an MBA, you've got lots of models that you need to learn, so on and so forth. They are very good. But the issue is not populating the model. It's taking the gist out of those models and creating a simplified view for your organization and see what's working. So it's no use doing a pestle analysis and a SWOT analysis if all you have is a specific element, which is very important. You know, you need to be aware of everything, but at the same time, focus on just what is important. We have so much limited space in our brain to think about that it's no use looking at complexity. You need to have simplicity, and simplicity is not easy, mind you, because having simple frameworks, and this is what my book does, it tries to glean out from the complexity in the world and use simplistic models but which focus purely and primarily on the things that count. So one of the things, for example, is vital signs. I call vital signs. So if you have KPIs, you don't need 200 KPIs. You can't manage 200 KPIs. Look at 10 to 15 and focus on those which are important, but monitor them ruthlessly. So I try to help managers and try to help SMEs to chart out these programs and involve people right from the start, because from my experience, most of digital transformation projects fail, not because of the technology, but because of the lack of the involvement of people right from day one.
They're very insightful. And I think, that sort of practical approach and keeping things simple, it's so important in digital transformation, but it's also important in many other aspects of business, because we can get very carried away or distracted, and being able to focus, as you say, to narrow down maybe some of those key performance indicators into the 10 or 12 that really matter, as opposed to trying to do everything all the time. And I think, whether it's the book Digital Made Simple, which people should obviously go out and grab a copy of, it's about that practical approach to it, isn't it? And as we were talking about earlier, getting through the chaos to the reality of what you need to focus on and what you need to do. Before we run out of time, David, 2 questions I want to ask you. Number one is there anything else maybe that we haven't touched on, or maybe something that we have touched on that you'd like to expand upon, some sort of parting thoughts for our audience today? And secondly, and importantly, if people want to connect with you, find out more about your one-on-one consultancy, find out more about the book, find out more about all the great things you're involved in, where's the best place to point people to? So you can take those in any order you want, but I'd love you to maybe expand on both of those for me.
Thank you for these questions, Simon. What I like to add is that my philosophy is that digital is human. So we don't have 2 opposing parties. We don't have a computer or technology or a human which are at odds together. Technology is there for humanity. And it should really reflect the human values, and we should need to involve the human in the implementation of technology. And this is one of the biggest mistakes that organizations make, in my view. They are afraid of disclosing their plans to people, and they just throw technology out there for people to actually implement, only to find that people are then reluctant to work with the technology. Whereas if you create an environment where the technology is of benefit to the human, and by human I don't mean just the shareholder, because you need to obviously, not in terms of, yes, you want to increase the profits, but it should not be a zero-sum game. If you are increasing the size of the cake and everyone gets a better piece of the cake. So everyone is winning, no one is losing of the cake. And I think this is a very important consideration. Why? Because even if you have the acceptance, and there's a difference again between motivation and commitment. Motivation is about incentives, incentivizing someone to achieve something because of an increase in power. But you don't want that, because motivation is temporary. And once you lose motivation, then you lose momentum. What you need is commitment. And commitment is built on trust. So, and you build trust by not having an open door policy in your organization, but by putting door out of the way, going down on the shop floor, being with your people, and if there are pains, you have to you share their pain as well, and showing genuine interest in their pains and trying to help them to move on in spite of the changes that the technology is making. In terms of your second question, if anyone would like to contact me, they can contact me on email david.galea@david-galea.com, and they can visit my website www.david-galea.com.
Well, thank you, David. Really liked what you said about building trust, so important. But also the thing that really stuck with me, that resonated with me, that's gone right in, is that digital is for humanity. Really like that approach. That brings us nicely, David, to the end of our discussion today. I want to thank everybody who's watching or listening to our discussion around the world. Make sure that you like, follow, subscribe, do everything I need you to do to help the show, the global discussion. Go out and check everything that David's involved in. Check out Digital Made Simple. Connect with him. There's an awful lot of expertise and knowledge here that David can help you with. And I hope that you'll join me back here for some more conversations with creatives and leaders and thinkers just like David. But thank you, David. A real pleasure to talk to you again today.
Yes, Simon. Thank you very much.